Okay. Okay, Ms. Vasquez. So we're going to go ahead and look at your lesson plan, right? And then knowing that you just finished your division unit, right?
Right.
And you're going into financial literacy. Can you tell me a little bit about the standard that you're going to be covering? I know it's 4.10A, right, in financial literacy?
Right. So I want, we're looking at distinguishing between fixed and variable expenses.
Okay. Okay. And I can see that right here. So let's go ahead and talk about your objective. If we look at that.
So when I look at my objective, it says students will be able to distinguish between fixed and variable expenses.
Okay. Do you think that that aligns to the standard itself?
What I would say yes, because what I want my students to do is to be able to tell the difference between these two types of expenses. So I would say yes.
It does seem like it, right?
Right.
Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and, so now you know what you want to teach, right? You know the objective of the students. How do you plan to assess this?
So like my exit ticket?
Your exit ticket.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that I'm going to give the kids 5 real world problems.
Okay.
So that they can be able to distinguish between a fixed and variable expense. And so originally I had thought 2, but then I didn't think 2 was enough to let me know whether or not they really can distinguish between both.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and do just 5, and then I'm going to do it with an 80% accuracy because, you know, like maybe they can miss 1, but they'll still master it at 80%.
At 80%. Okay.
Right.
And I think we have, it's going to be 10 to 15 minutes, right? So if we look at those real world scenarios, if you have 5, you're looking at how many minutes in each of those?
Well, I'm thinking that, so it's 5, and it's a total of 15. So I'm thinking that some problems may take between 2 to 3 minutes. I do have some of my tier 3 kids that may take a little bit longer, so I want to give them the same opportunity and not just kind of like stop it. And I know they take a little bit longer to be able to do their work.
Okay. So do you think that five is enough? You just. Okay,
I feel comfortable with 5. As I said earlier, originally I had put 2, but then the more I think about it, I feel like it's either going to be a 50 or
a 0.
or a 0 or 100. You know,
Or
like 100,
100.
that would be perfect. But and I feel like that's not enough time for them, like enough opportunities for them to be able to see if they mastered the TEK or not. So.
Yes, that's good. So I think on that, it would be better to change it from 2 to 5, right?
Yes.
That's good. Okay, so I can see how make sure that those word problems may be a little bit shorter, right? Or what are you thinking, shorter, longer on that one?
You know, because we are just focusing on either a fixed variable or a variable, I think that should be plenty of time.
Okay.
Like later in the week, I'm going to be teaching profit, so that one's going to be a little bit more time consuming.
Okay.
But for this, it's just distinguishing between the both.
So short,
Right.
a little bit more short.
I feel like it should. However, I'm spending 2 days on that TEK, so that way I give it enough time.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And that's going to be about 10 to 15 minutes. So now let's talk about your actual lesson. How are you planning to talk about it? Because I see your anchor chart here. So
Right.
if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Going into my lesson, I want to make sure that I explicitly let them know what a fixed and a variable expense is. So with my anchor chart, you know, it does have the T chart where they can distinguish between both, and then I let them know that it occurs regularly. The amount does not change or fixed, and each time it's going to be the same. So it's not a surprise; it's going to be the same. And so if you see there, I have some examples: rent, car payment, phone bill, which is something that they normally encounter each and every day.
They have that background knowledge.
Right. And so for my variable expense, you know, I have the opposite. It does not occur regularly. The amounts change according to the need or want. So for example, clothes is not always going to be the same. The jeans are not always going to be the same price. They might, you know, come down after some time. gifts are not ever going to be the same. And of course, we know vacation, it changes it depending on the amount of activities, on the season. So, those are some of the things that I want them to know, that it does not change.
Okay.
Or that it does change, I'm sorry.
And that's going to be in your modeling. So
Right.
your modeling is going to be guided through or driven by your anchor chart.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Right. So I'll already have my anchor chart made, just because I want them to know that those are some of, I guess, their everyday exposures that are not either going to change or stay the same, or change.
Change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So by having your anchor chart put up there with everything already, how do you think for example, any ADHD students that you may have? So, for example, I see that you have labeled some of your students here as either ADHD or special needs. How do you think those students may be affected by just it being there already?
Well, just simply like with the color, obviously, but then also like the images that are there, or the illustrations that I put on there. Like, it's gonna let them know, like, oh, this is something that I do, this is something that I wear, this is something that I did in the summer with my family. So
You don't think they may be a little bit distracted?
Well, perhaps yes, but since it's gonna be posted in the room, like, let's say that particular time they are distracted by it, but then it'll be there for their choice to see whenever they need it.
Okay.
So if they don't want to deal with it, then they don't look at it. But if they're like, oh, I forgot it's there, let me go ahead and take a look.
Okay. So how can you determine, like, oh, this is the one I'm talking about? Are you just going to be pointing at it, or do you feel like maybe you have something and then just kind of slap it there?
Oh, like a
Or what do you-
little, like what is it called? Like like physically put it, you mean like stick it like on a post-it, or?
Maybe on a post-it, and then have it put there. That way you're doing one at a time. You're showing one at a
I
time.
see. Like, instead of having it all at once, kind of like one at a time, so that way it's not overwhelming for those
It's not
kids.
overwhelming, and then you're giving them time to process.
Okay.
Right? So that would be a good thing. I like that modeling. You're visually seeing it, and I like the color of it.
Okay.
Because you're attracting the visual of the students, right? And do you think that that's going to go back to your objective and to your assessment, to your standard?
I would say yes.
You're focusing on those fixed and those
yes.
variables, right? Very good. And then the last thing, or closing into it on your guided, you said you're going to do a table talk discussion, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you just put their table discussing other expenses.
So my idea was to like give them those that they're kind of encountering all the time, but I also wanted them to think about, come up with some of the expenses that they've seen their parents do in class, like put them in fixed or variable.
Okay.
So they have to come up with examples.
So they have to come up with examples, and you want them to do this in 15 minutes.
Right.
Right. Okay. What about those kids that are having a hard time coming up with examples? What do you have planned for them?
Well, you know what? I do have my tier 3 students, and I guess I really hadn't thought about that. But maybe what I can do is, I guess like you suggested, to just put one expense at a time on the anchor chart.
Mm-hmm.
I guess since they are doing a table talk, what I could do is have little cards
Okay.
of different expenses, and then maybe they can classify them. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about one of my students that could potentially not
get there.
Right. And so,
Okay, so on your guided, you were talking about doing that table discussion, right? And you want them to
Like,
discuss other expenses.
Right.
So you wanted them to come up with the expense.
right.
Right.
But now that you,
And that's what I mentioned, to go back to your standard.
Okay.
Right. And look if in your standard it says come up with expenses. So I want you to, if we look at the standard, does it say to come up with expenses?
no, it says distinguish between fixed and variable expenses. So I guess I'm kind of swaying, like going away from what the standard is. So So then it's going to be definitely having that for them already, and maybe they can classify them.
Right.
And like distinguish between, like, so I could do like a T-chart and then have like fixed and variables, and then they can categorize them.
Okay.
So that way they don't spend time coming up with them and then feeling frustrated because they can't think of any other expenses. So then just have it pre-done for them with little cards maybe, and then they can just categorize them. And then I guess that will have them come up with their math talks and accountable talks, so that way it's not just like, well, what do you think? What do you think? And it's more like, okay, no, the car is a fixed, or it's not a fixed.
So they're talking about the objective rather than,
well, what expense has happened? So I can see where that could have gone the other way, or like a different route, I guess.
Right. So because they only have those 15 minutes to actually practice that, right, before they get to their exit ticket. So
I hadn't thought about that.
That's good. So make sure that activity does line up to that standard. Okay, and focus on, are the students really doing what the standard is saying, rather than figuring out something and then working on
like having to come up with, where it never said come up with expenses. I can see how that's going to be beneficial.
So that's good. I like the way that you're doing really good on this lesson plan. I like it, and I like that you have those manipulatives for the kids to just actually grasp and touch, rather than just discuss it, right?
Right.
And then on your reflection, you said that they're going to write on their journals, right? For your closure, on how you're going to close that lesson.
Right. I just said closure, what is the difference between a fixed and a variable expense? And then just for my purposes, I put possible answers. The fixed expense is the same amount paid over. So they're kind of telling me what a fixed expense is and what a variable expense is. But then it also gives me the opportunity to see what else they grasped from my lesson, versus just tell me the definition about fixed and variable. It just says the difference versus give me the definition.
Okay.
So then it lets me really know, did they really understand it, or did I just have them memorize the definition?
Okay. So it'll be more like a Venn diagram, putting like how are they similar and different?
No, I actually want them to, not a Venn diagram, because I want to incorporate the writing aspect. Since ideally we want them to be writing in every subject, so I want them to do a reflection. So it's going to be like a paragraph form versus a Venn diagram, because I really want them to use their sentences and really think about what they learned throughout the lesson. So it's more like a writing, like a quick write versus a Venn diagram.
Okay. So let's go back to, in this closure, are they distinguishing between a fixed and an expense variable?
But I just use the word difference instead of distinguish. So it's I saw it as a synonym, but
okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, and looking at our data from the school, we know that we were at 34% on this standard, right? So it's something that you're going to have to truly be explicitly teaching.
Right. And even though like it's only tested once in STAR, like that's a question that can easily be taught and work toward the students versus hurting them. Okay. So even though it's just one time, it's still important. It's still a high leverage TEK in my opinion, just because that could be the difference between a meets and a masters, and approaches and does not approach.
And then also because we care about the student actually learning the standards, right?
Applying it to
they have to know the standard and apply it. Okay.
To the real world.
To the real world. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going in the right track, and maybe in the closure, just mention what they're going to do tomorrow, just so that the kids can have time to think about, tomorrow I can look forward to this.